Fetterman and Associates, an international evaluation consulting firm. He's a Stanford alum and has 25 years of experience at Stanford, including serving as Director of Evaluation in the School of Education and School of Medicine. He's a Director of Arkansas Evaluation Center at the University of Arkansas in Pine Bluff. And over 25 years of service, he held positions in Stanford's administration, School of Education, and School of Medicine. He's also past president of the American Evaluation Association and a recipient of the association's highest honors in theory and practice. His recent books include Empowerment Evaluation Principles and Practice and Ethnography. I think I pronounced that properly. This is pretty intense stuff, and throughout his work, you just see the word evaluation over and over again. I want to welcome to the program David Fetterman. Hi, David.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I appreciate you being willing to spend the time with us. And have you always had this gift of evaluation? Because clearly you've been involved in that your whole career.
Well, it's interesting. In one way or another, I think, of course, all of us are evaluators, whether it's using consumer reports or assessing our cars or our mates. So I've been involved in it since early grad school experience and for the last 2 or 3 decades now.
Yeah. Yeah, and now tell us about Fetterman and Associates, because that's since your time, the time you put in since being in academia. Now you're with a private consulting firm. Tell us about Fetterman and Associates.
Sure, thanks. I have been doing Fetterman and Associates actually for about 25 years concurrently.
Oh, okay.
With being a professor at the same time. But we do international evaluation and domestic. So we'll come into a school and ask, can we be of assistance in helping them get their scores a little higher, better education system moving forward, more efficient. We work in hospitals, doing the same thing, preparing medical students to be good physicians for us. I work in Arkansas, helping with tobacco prevention with minority kids. We do a lot of work helping people assess where they are and very often teach them how to assess themselves so that they have an ongoing process of self-assessment and improving their program performance.
Now, another word that I struggled with to pronounce and not having practiced it was ethnography, if I said that right. That obviously is a term that's important in your most recent work. Could you describe ethnography for us?
Sure. It seems kind of esoteric, but all it really is, it's an art and a science of observing, but from a qualitative perspective and from the insider's perspective. So you're trying to describe as accurately as you can what you see in a classroom, what you see in a hospital, what you see in a business. And you get it not just from the external expert's perspective, but from the insider's perspective of reality. Because even if you don't agree with that inside perception of reality, there are real consequences. Just for example, when I worked in a psychiatric ward in a VA hospital, a lot of these guys thought they could fly. Not like you and me fly in a plane, I mean fly. And you may not agree with that, and I may not agree with that, but there are real-world consequences for that perception of reality if they're on the third floor and there are no bars on the window. Yep. So what I look at is not just objective reality, but the perception of reality, and ethnography is a tool to get at that inside information.
Okay. And finally, just setting the stage here, obviously, you've been studying the work of Hewlett-Packard, Stanford University, the collaboration there to work with 3 specific communities and try to build a wireless network that's available to them. Is that something you were involved in, or you came in afterwards and helped to evaluate its effectiveness?
They asked me to come in. It's interesting. Let me just give you. They asked me to come in and do the evaluation of all the entire program, using an approach I came up with called empowerment evaluation, which I'll describe in a second. But it's teaching people basically how to assess their own performance. Okay. But let me just mention briefly the way the world is sort of upside down in relation to that question. I was first working on a similar project in one of the communities, and a local foundation didn't think we were going fast enough and didn't like the results. They weren't moving in the pace they had in mind. So they were not as interested in keeping us funded. I'll just be very honest about what happened. So the corporation, not the foundation, the corporation, Hewlett-Packard, came to me. I was a professor at Stanford and running the Master's in Policy Analysis Evaluation program. So I had a lot of my students all over the place in the Bay Area for internships. They came over to me and said, David, we like what you're doing. we realize it takes longer to invest in people and have them take responsibility and build their own businesses. We want to fund you to evaluate all of this times 3 around the country. So, of course, I said, well, what's your interest? And they said very bluntly, to make money.
Yeah.
So I said, well, that's blunt, but I'm still not sure I want that as a response to helping people and social change as the only criteria anyway. And they said, don't worry, we're not interested in forcing people to buy software or hardware that they don't need. We just want to have a lot of branding so that when we give them equipment, they may remember us later down the road when they're very successful. I said, that's a reasonable bargain.
Yeah.
And that's how I started entering into working with them from the beginning. And what empowerment evaluation does as a tool, it helps people use evaluation as part of the planning and management of their operation. Instead of being separate and parasitic and people don't want it, it's more, this is what you do to run a business, run a school, to run a social program. It makes evaluation feedback just normal part of your daily operations.
Okay.
And that's how I got introduced to this whole process, working with them. And I became what's called a critical friend, someone who believes in what they're doing. But because I believe in the concept of the program, I'm even more critical of their operations because I want it to work. So I'll give them additional feedback more than they would normally get.
Sure. So in other words, you're gonna come at them with brutal honesty about how effective and how pervasive it is in terms of empowering the people of those communities.
Yeah, I try to, you remain diplomatic, and you, because you want to have, if you're not too diplomatic, you're not going to have no one's going to listen, but you're very straightforward, like you say, brutally honest about, here's where things are. You're not making around the corner fiscally, or you're not making it around educationally, whatever's going on. Here are some suggestions, but let me hear your suggestions. I ask the community, and we work on those strategies and monitor those and alter them as necessary.
It's interesting. You're talking about, from what I understand, a $15 million project that was the work of Hewlett-Packard and Stanford. And why those particular communities, East Palo Alto, San Diego, and Baltimore? What led them to choose those communities?
Well, they all had to compete with some sort of idea of how to improve their own communities from a technological perspective. That was pretty much the requirement. And these are the groups that came up with the most cohesive idea of where they should go. For example, the Tribal Digital Village, they ended up building the largest unlicensed wireless system in the country, according to the former head of the FCC, unlicensed because they're a sovereign nation. They also built a digital printing press. So they had the potential to do tremendous things and actually pulled it off. Similarly, East Palo Alto and Baltimore, they had very powerful messages in their proposals that suggested they could make an impact on their school systems from a technological perspective, and all of them had a pretty good case for making technologically oriented small businesses. It was a very entrepreneurial kind of operation or initiative.
Okay, and so out of this, did they actually see, did the results include a lot of new initiatives? Did it attract venture capital where small startup enterprises could thrive?
Yeah, it was very, let's put it this way, it's a very unsanitized book, very honest book. So in some cases, very successful. Right through the roof, phenomenal stuff, like building the largest wireless system in the country, selling part of the bandwidth to subsidize some of their other activities educationally, establishing a digital printing press, attracting additional sources of money both from the government for e-learning as well as from private sources. On the other hand, we're also very honest about what didn't work. It was not all smooth sailing and that sort of thing. I should say another positive is that Baltimore and East Palo Alto were able to help transform their school system simply by introducing hundreds of laptops to the kids and teachers, but not really just distributing them. They also provided training, guidance on how to use them and build it into the curriculum. And it started changing the whole nature of where kids were looking and what teachers were doing with their educational programs. So those are super positives. Now, let me mention where it didn't work if I could.
Yeah.
I'd like to be honest that it's not all, none of this is smooth sailing. We make many mistakes, I should say right up front. For every success, there's definitely a number of errors or missteps, but you pull it around using this approach called empowerment evaluation, where you're constantly reassessing everything you're doing to see if you're on track. But one just quick example of a misstep. One of the sites uninvited the host, the HP. Now, you don't hear of that too often and still survive in business or in education. That was a major faux pas. Now, HP, to their credit at the time, said, no, we understand. We believe in more local control, which is a lot of what this is about. Mm-hmm. So people are not going to be able to develop and sustain anything unless they actually take charge of their own lives. And that actually was true for this entire initiative. But they said, they're not ready for us, so of course they don't want to waste anyone's time, and they're pushing us back. And quite frankly, that was a major mistake.
Okay.
All of us should have said, that's a red flag. Whether you're ready or not, let's take a look is what should have happened. Because what happened is they became emboldened to think they could turn anyone away and any resource that was offered to them away, and it put them at a disadvantaged position for months and months and months.
Wow.
Yeah. So they made some major mistakes along the way, which now in retrospect we would not let happen for any kind of replication or duplication of this kind of effort.
Well, when you're doing something so fresh and new, it stands to reason that there would be some mistakes. And did they were able to shift gears and about face pretty quickly on that?
Yeah, I would say unfortunately because of a crisis mode, yes.
Okay.
So what happened, and this happens very often with a lot of nonprofits I work with and organizations I work with and companies, they'll get to a crisis mode of realizing they're not getting anywhere near the goals or the benchmarks they had established, and in fact they're retrievably behind. Mm-hmm. So in this case, they called us in. We were the evaluators, but the way it worked is we had to work with their permission that they felt comfortable with us, and they called us in before they called HP.
Okay.
So and the deal was, we're not going to say anything to HP, and HP understood that, until you're ready for us to talk to them, but we're here to help you. Basically, we're very much like you, I guess, a financial advisor. We can assist people to move forward and plan and achieve their objectives, but there's no guarantee. They have to listen to us, and the market's the market. It's not a perfect science, but we basically are there to facilitate that through evaluation feedback. So that's what we help them do, and pull themselves together sort of near the final end of the process, and they were able to at least meet all the minimum objectives, but nowhere near going right through the roof like the other digital villages.
Okay.
So they all pulled it off, but some did phenomenally well, and some did all right, and some did just barely making the minimum requirements.
Okay. How did the marriage of the private enterprise Hewlett-Packard, the company went through a lot of management changes and vision changes during that period of time, how did the partnership with Stanford University, a long-established, widely regarded as probably the top education institution on the West Coast, how did that partnership work out?
Well, it was very interesting. Stanford and HP, as you know, are brother and sister type of thing. They came from Stanford, both Hewlett and Packard. So there's been a long-standing relationship between them that sort of withstands the test of time, basically. Not that it hasn't had issues and problems, as you're suggesting, that's for sure. But the more important ones at the time were acquisitions. Just as a quick example, I don't know if you recall, but they were acquiring Compaq in those days.
Sure.
And that was a fiasco. I mean, Carly did a great job in trying to orchestrate it, and it did end up very nicely, down the road. But at the time, it was so disruptive to the company that it had a spillover effect on the initiative, so that the equipment that we were depending on to distribute to the classroom, to use as routers for towers, to connect with the towers, the wireless system, all the other things we were looking for, were delayed. Well, that became a situation where a typical evaluator would blame the victim. They would say, oh, you guys aren't getting it off the ground in the tribal digital village, or the Baltimore, or the Palo Alto digital village. When in fact, what it is a ripple effect or reflection of the distribution problems going on as a result of the disruption of acquiring Compaq, and that's slowing all of the deliveries down, not just the ones related to the initiative. So you had to sort of study up, as Laura Nader refers to it, rather than just studying down to see what the problem is.
One of the, we don't have a lot of time left, but I'm kind of curious from your perspective, having studied this, evaluated it, and understood, being neck deep in the heart of these digital village initiatives, there's a debate that's I think is kind of slow moving about whether there should be a nationwide wireless network available to everybody versus the private sector on a piecemeal and on a regional basis making internet available to people. Whether it's through the cable or through phone companies, whatever it may be. Do you believe that there should be virtually free wireless internet available across the country?
Yes, but not only the country, but internationally. I work in Japan, I work in Nepal, I work in South Africa. I work all around the world. Just got back from Korea, and there's no question we're a global family, whether we recognize it or not. And in spite of the issue of the fiscal cliff and everything else going on, we're a much closer family than we may recognize. If we even look at our clothing, you can see it comes from every part of the world.
Yeah.
Not just the United States. So the answer to your question first, yes, throughout the United States, we should have free internet, no question about it. We've already seen what this does to the country to have a digital disadvantage, where some folks have access and some folks do not have access. For the digital villages that I worked with, the internet lit the way out of the digital darkness for many, for employment, for education, health, everything. So I would agree 100%, but I would extend it a little further, that we have to start thinking in a more global terms as far as internet use.